Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Ending the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Friends, and welcome to this May 19, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story tonight, we go overseas to Serbia, Bosnia, where they've called for international help to rescue people from inundated areas, I guess you'd best call them, after the worst flooding since modern records began. Yes.
The Western Balkans underwater. These are the worst floods the region has seen in living memory. The deluge has forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. 3 months' worth of rain fell in just 3 days last week, and this is the result. International aid is coming in for people without power and fresh water.
My house has been flooded up to the roof. It's an old house. We all really need help.
In Serbia, at least the floodwater has been receding as fears of a river surge ease. But it's too late for the towns which have already been swamped. Many people are still cut off, and food and water supplies are scarce. Just like the rest of the town, the hotel Obrenovac is underwater. Boat is really the only sensible way of getting around a lot of this town now. There are some people who still remain. These rescue workers are bringing in emergency supplies for them and also for the hundreds upon hundreds of people who are trying to help the situation here. Agriculture has been hit badly. Officials say it might take 5 years to recover. Livestock have been left to fend for themselves, and for the many uninsured farmers, it's a disaster. The aid effort flies a multitude of flags. There are rescue helicopters from the European Union, the United States and Russia. The sandbags remain in place, with concerns that river levels may yet rise later in the week. At least the rain has stopped, but there'll be fresh challenges once the water recedes. Guy Delaunay, BBC News, Obrenovac.
French Serbian Grand Slam tennis champion who has just won his third Italian Open title in Rome told the BBC it had been very emotional for him to see the suffering in his country.
You know, I was trying, although I was being a part of the tournament, to raise the awareness about what's going on, because I thought, looking at the international media, that there hasn't been too much awareness and too much talk about floods in Serbia that haven't been worse in the last 130 years. So people are struggling, people are losing homes. And in a suburb of Belgrade, in the small city of Obrenovac, it is the worst by far situation in the last 4 days. There has been a lot of casualties that still the government is not able to name and to number, because they are still discovering new bodies as the flood is backing up. So it's been a very emotional week for me. Part of me is very happy to win the tournament here in Rome. That is a big one in our sport. But on the other hand, my thoughts and all my love was with the close ones and with my people in Serbia. I'm not pointing a finger and blaming any network or any international media. I was just trying to use my status, to use my position, and contribute in such way for my country in these difficult times to attract more attention and to get more broadcast from the news in Serbia, and that was the whole idea and purpose of my actions in the last 2 days. But the most important thing is to say that after the floods are over and after the situation is better, we are going to have a period of several months, and might take also several years, of recovery and getting people to the stable ground and getting people to their normal lives and having the home and the roof above their heads. And that is the process. The length of the process depends on the help that Serbia actually gets from abroad. That is why I and several other athletes and famous people from our country have been trying to raise this awareness internationally.
And friends, you heard the tennis star say that the floods there are the worst in 130 years. In the video before that, the BBC reporter said that the floods are the worst ever in recorded history, which should tell us something. That and a lot of other news that is presently going should be signaling us to something that I'll talk to you about a little bit later in the program, about how when you see the leaves on the fig tree become ripe, know that summer is nigh. We'll talk about what Christ meant about just which summer and what he meant by summer being nigh. But the aerial video is from yesterday, showing what the officials in the Balkans say are the worst floods in the Balkans for decades, they're saying. The officials saying it's threatening Serbia's main power plant. The river Sava has burst its banks in many areas, and water levels are expected to peak. Well, were expected to peak yesterday, actually. At least 20 people, as of yesterday, have died in Serbia and Bosnia after a month's worth of rain fell in 3 days. Now, we've had other reports for you saying that 3 months worth of rain fell in 3 days. Maybe that was a different area. But the death toll that I just gave you of 20, or those who died, number at least 20, having been reported as died, that toll is expected to rise by the time they get a final count. Now, I want to go on and show you a little bit more news. Yesterday we mentioned something before I comment further on what I said I'd be commenting on. Yesterday we didn't have the video on the California fire report for yesterday. I have 2 videos tonight. One from yesterday, I was able to get it, and we have this video from Friday. I want to show you first where it shows firefighters having beaten back parts of the 9 blazes raging in Southern California, San Diego County, allowing thousands of displaced locals to return to the area. But a flare-up of a wildfire in San Marcos prompted more than 13,000, that's right, I said 13,000 new evacuation notices to residents. Here's the report from last night with Rikin Marangithia.
An apocalyptic scene. 3 days on, and swathes of Southern California are still being gorged on by wildfires. Over 10,000 acres now burnt to ashes. Everything from the local Legoland to a nuclear power plant has had to be evacuated. Residents have been urged to flee as fast as possible.
You have the evacuation order, evacuate. Do not wait. Heed the first responders that are out there. Make sure you get out, and you get out quickly.
With military equipment deployed, the fight back has come to resemble a war effort. But bone-dry conditions created by 3 years of drought and relentless winds from the Pacific mean that they are often left limping behind.
It was really quick. My husband just happened to be coming up the hill. My daughters were at school. He saw a very small fire starting, and he saw the smoke and called me on his way up and said, get the kids in the car.
It's a home that we didn't live in a few years ago. We don't live in now, so we'll have a chance to have a new home.
Over 120,000 evacuation notices have been issued. Yet with what has now become an almost annual assault on their homes, many residents remain stoic and thankful that they have all so far escaped alive. Rikin Majithia, BBC News.
And friends, this report from Friday with Marika Oy shows there was a little recess over the weekend, but then as you heard last night, these fires still raging with that new evacuation notice given newly to 13,000 residents. But here's the report showing how military aircraft and all have been used or is being used to fight this fire. Mariko Oy.
Houses that are reduced to ashes. This is the result of wildfires that destroyed thousands of acres of land in the San Diego region this week. More than 120,000 people left their homes. But some evacuation orders have been lifted.
It was just such a wonderful blessing to be back here home. It was almost teary-eyed kind of thing. So it's great. It's wonderful.
Our heart really goes out to the people that have lost their homes, but we're finding this is a community that will really come together and help these people.
The area is prone to wildfires, but they usually occur much later in the year. The question has been asked what started them so early, and a 57-year-old man has been charged with arson. Calmer winds have helped firefighters gain control for now, but they are bracing for a long, hot and dry wildfire season. Mariko Oy, BBC News.
And friends, after I show you this next video of people in South Sudan facing their worst ever famine, we'll talk just a few moments about what we should be expecting in the way of prophecy.
The world's youngest nation is now the world's most desperate. In this Juba camp, almost 20,000 civilians struggle to stay alive. The UN, which runs it, calls it a death trap. Cholera has already begun to spread in Juba. Only one thing has pulled people into this camp: fear. South Sudan's civil war has poisoned the country with ethnic hate. These people are Nuer, as is the leader of South Sudan's armed rebellion, so they've become a target.
The killing is only they were killing Nuer tribe.
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing, like what happened in Rwanda.
Your house is literally 3 minutes walk from where we are sitting now in the UN camp.
Absolutely.
Why do you not go home now?
Because if I go home, they will kill me. They will kill me.
The fighting between forces loyal to the president and rebels led by the former vice president has lasted 5 months. A ceasefire deal 10 days ago was purely theoretical. So aid supply lines have been cut, subsistence farmers can't plant crops, and mass hunger looms. South Sudan's army can still muster a show of strength for their cowboy-hatted president, but his war with the rebels threatens to devastate his country. Your government doesn't understand how serious the situation is.
No, we understand. It is a man-made disaster. And this is why we want the war to stop, so that we allow the humanitarian access to everybody in the country. The civil population is going to face one of the worst famines that has ever been witnessed in South Sudan.
Because of the war and impassable roads, emergency food supplies are now being dropped by plane. It's hugely expensive. And without an injection of hundreds of millions of dollars, the international relief effort will soon grind to a halt.
We basically have enough resources to keep this sort of operation going for about 1 more month. So we need more money to avoid a catastrophic situation.
For now, the airdrops continue, but in South Sudan, the margin between life and death has become perilously thin. And if the war continues, it'll get still thinner. Stephen Saka, BBC News, Juba, South Sudan.
Thank you, Stephen. Friends, I was saying to you that we'd talk for a moment about what to expect seeing these situations where the worst famine ever, the worst floods ever, the worst fires ever. I think that's talking about an accelerated situation with these seals from Revelation, and we're seeing more mobs and sedition, more internal strife in countries than ever. I could sit here and show you story after story after story. I mean, every night we have a news report where this area and that area is overthrowing its prime minister and trouble galore. So internal strife, the red horse going bananas with war and rumors of war. And then we've got the Ukraine situation that's tensing things up in Europe between the East and the West, and then we've got this report tonight, and it's not the first we've had of scarcity of food and famine, but the one tonight with the report of worst ever. There have been other worst evers in other areas in the past year. So that black horse is riding ferociously, which has the characteristic, as Jesus Christ described it in plain language in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, as scarcity of food, famine. And then the pale horse has really been super active in the past year and a half, in the past many months. This horse has been galloping incredibly, and the rider of this horse is named Death, and alongside this rider named Death and the pale horse is, Revelation says, Hades, hell, the grave, rides. And the characteristics that Jesus Christ described of this deadly horse were three Greek terms that he used. The most primary one that we've heard Mr. Armstrong emphasize is the element or term of loimos. You can probably see the three terms below at the bottom of the fourth column where it says pale for the pale horse. Loimos, Greek English lexicon will tell you, means pestilence, disease epidemics, the plagues of Egypt. And those are rampant in the news. Other characteristics of that horse, we were to watch for seismic activity, seismic conditions, commotions in the air, gale force winds of all kinds, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, etc., and commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions, and wildfires, and floods. They come from commotions in the air, too much rain, and in other areas, not enough rain, reversing that and causing the third seal, famines. And all of that, when it accelerates, Christ told us to know that when the leaves of the fig tree are ripe, know that summer is nigh. The summer that's nigh is the next major event in prophecy, which before Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong died, he told us that would be the Great Tribulation, the fifth seal. You can see it here on the chart. These 6 seals are from Revelation 6, and the 7th seal starts in Revelation 8. If we broaden the chart to include all 7 seals, you'll see that 7th seal is quite a big seal. That 7th seal consists of 7 trumpets, and the 7th trumpet consists of 7 last plagues. So that 7th seal is 7 trumpets and 7 last plagues, all in and of itself as the 7th seal. But that happens after the sealing of the 7,000 of the sealing of the 144,000, which happens after the 6th seal, the heavenly signs and the sun, moon, and the stars, and those things come later. The next major event that has not happened yet is the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, the time, as Christ described it, of Jacob's trouble. He said a time that was so bad, nothing since the beginning of mankind has ever been so bad, and nothing again after it ever again will be as bad, thankfully. It'll be the time of round 3 of World War. It'll be the time of a revived Holy Roman Empire. It'll be the time for that revived Holy Roman Empire when a new emperor, most likely an Assyrian, will be coronated in a coronation ceremony by the Pope, where the Pope will take the crown, as he's done many times before, and placed it on the head of a new emperor over the Holy Roman Empire. Now that empire is now in the pit, it revived for a little while, for a short time, during, let's see if I can bring up the bottom of this chart, during the 6th head, as Revelation 17 describes it. That would be the 9th horn of Daniel 7. It'd be the, as I said, 6th head of Revelation 13, but the 6th of the remaining horns of Revelation 13. And let's see, do I have a shot where we can zero in on that bottom? Yeah, let's zoom in over there to the bottom corner. That 6th head was revived around 1936 all the way to 1945, during the time of Mussolini and Hitler, beginning when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia in 1936, and newspaper headlines, not on the first page but later in the paper, were seen by Mr. Herbert Armstrong that God used to wake to show Mr. Armstrong, his servant, that this Roman Empire had been revived, that the Holy Roman Empire had been revived, that this 6th head was then alive, even though it was only for a short time. It says, one is, and then it ended, and went in the pit, and left us in the state or situation where one is at the bottom. You can see one is yet to come. Mr. Armstrong was able to see during his lifetime. He would have been 44 years old in 1936 when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia. And God showed his servant that the 6th head had then been revived and that one was yet to come. And he was able to tell us about it and tell us what to watch for when that one comes. When that one is coronated in Frankfurt, Germany, by the Pope in a coronation ceremony as the Emperor, it'll be over a revived Holy Roman Empire. Not truly holy. It's called holy because the Pope is involved, the leader of this world's great religion, let's just say, that's influenced and prospered and politically made big around the world because of the God of this world, who the Father and his Son Christ have allowed to remain on this throne until Christ returns. Christ having already qualified to usher in and restore God's kingdom by having conquered Satan in the supreme battle for world rulership. Talk about a war or world war. That was the one that Christ fought with Satan while Christ was here on this earth alive. Satan took him up on the temple, showed him all the kingdoms, and said, look, just bow down and worship me. Turn these rocks into bread for yourself. Christ waited it out through the entire 40 days and resisted Satan, told him to get behind me, and gave us an example of how we resist Satan, Satan will flee from us. And in that, Christ conquered and overcame Satan and qualified by not yielding to him, by not submitting to Satan, but staying faithful to the Father, and is qualified to usher in and restore God's kingdom, thankfully. And what else about that 5th seal? The 5th seal, I mentioned to you, the Holy Roman Empire would be revived, a new emperor who the Bible calls a beast. And one of the most prominent things about this era, or a very prominent thing about this 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, is that it will be a time, as Jesus Christ described it, of great, not only great affliction, but martyrdom, where those who refuse to take the mark of the beast, those who refuse to bow down and worship the image of the beast, those who refuse to work on the Sabbath, who are left behind and not taken to a place of safety or protection or final training, those who are left behind and refuse to bow down to this beast will be martyred. And that's a very honorable and praiseworthy thing, and those who have the stamina and the guts to do it, and Christ will come and knock on the door of those who are left behind and say, look, I did it, I was crucified, hang in there, endure to the end, go through the martyrdom. You're going to have to go through it because you were lukewarm, I couldn't account you worthy to escape it, and I had to leave you behind, and I did it. You do it, and you'll wear the white robes. You'll be able to sup with me at the marriage supper, and along with those who were protected in the place of nourishment, protection, final training, safety. But you'll come up, those who are left behind and that have the guts to endure to the end through martyrdom, they'll come up ahead of us who are counted worthy and left behind. And hey, I salute those of you who are in that category. You get left behind and got the guts to stand up, you are welcome to go up first. And I'll watch you go up, and I hope you remember me in a good way. And in case I was left in case Christ wasn't quite sure at that moment about Steve Gilbreth, well, maybe one of you will put in a good word and say, hey, go ahead, bring him up. I saw some of his newscast. I heard, he did pretty good. He taught some nice dance classes at Ambassador College. He took care of his mom and dad. Bring the guy on up. He won't rebel for the eternity. Well, listen, actually, I hope Christ makes that decision himself, and I also, frankly, even though I'll salute those who have the guts to stand up to martyrdom, quite frankly, I hope I'm one of those mentioned in Luke 31. Let me get it right, friends. In Luke 21, verse 36, where Christ says, if you watch and pray always, so that, you can be accounted worthy to escape all these things. And he was talking about this moment in time now with the fifth seal, the next major event coming up in prophecy. So you can escape that martyrdom and that horrible, whorish time. And I hope those of you tuned in watching this, when the program is over tonight, you'll get on your knees about these people in famine in Sudan, and the people flooded over in Serbia and Bosnia, and the people who losing their homes in Southern California. Now, the last video I showed how was a little recess as of Friday, but then the video from last night shows 13,000 new people had to receive evacuation notices, so the fire flamed back up. And all of these intense things are telling us that the United Europe, the 10 nations, the 5 from the east, 5 from the west, that 5 of iron, 5 of miry clay, though they won't get along. The events, probably those in Ukraine, maybe some others, maybe the China, Vietnam, China, Japan row over the islands in the South China Seas, which I got a video on that for you tonight. We're going to go a little bit longer because a lot of news tonight, and friends, we're in a situation where this thing could trigger very fast. Now, God could slow it down again. He could take his time before he brings together United Europe, depending on just many factors. But if things don't slow down the way they're running in news today, if they keep galloping like this, this could be the year. And if they keep galloping like this, I'll stick my neck out and say, you better be ready. Now, we've seen in the past where it looked like maybe things could come together, and then things went on for a long time, perhaps because of us, you, me. We weren't ready, and God needed to wake us up and work some things out of us. And you saw situations in the past where some people mortgaged their homes and lost their homes because they thought we were going to go in 72 and we'd be through. And things like that. So there's some wisdom, and you have to balance it. Like I'm having to balance it right now about how much work to do outside in my garden and plans I have for an underground garden for planting tropical, where tropical plants will grow, so I can grow my own bananas and pineapples and what have you underground with sunshine coming down there, making a lot of heat even through the winter. I'm saying, okay, how much time do I spend on that? Because if we go this year, I'll never see the fruit of all that labor and work. Or, should I focus more on this? Or should I balance it? Because, if you sit around and work all day, they say you can get diabetes and other ailments. There's studies now. Maybe I'll show you one night, a video on how if you sit and work all day, that can tend to problems. They're learning that it's better if you vary your work. Don't stand all day, but don't sit all day either. Stand some, sit some. In London and England, they have some places where their employers provide the option to the employee to stand or sit. Their desk, they can raise them and stand and work, or they can lower them and sit down and work. And they encourage people to spend an hour or two each way, standing, working, and sitting and working for a while. But things are such, friends, that this thing could go. This thing could go if the news keeps up the way it is night after night. It's just, I can't see how it'll do anything else but happen soon. As Christ told us, when you see the leaves on the fig tree ripe, know that summer is nigh. These leaves on the fig tree, these news stories are telling us these seals are ripe to pack us right into the fifth seal of the Great Tribulation. Now, I told you about a story last night that I didn't have the video for, from an event yesterday. I've got it tonight. It's where Prince Harry was visiting yesterday the monastery at Monte Cassino in southern Italy, where tens of thousands of Allied troops, many of them British, died in the effort to drive out the Germans from the area and from the monastery there itself that was founded some 1,500 years ago, which was almost completely destroyed during that battle. In the period after the war, the abbey was magnificently restored on its mountaintop perch, and but traces of its wartime destruction can still be found. Hidden in a dark corner of the monastery is a room containing the last of the rubble from the bombing of Monte Cassino. It's not been shown to the public, and it's actually never even been filmed before. But the BBC's Alan Johnston was given access to it, and he laboriously takes us through this. Watch, this is, even though it's a patient, quiet video, it's significant and important. Take a look at this.
We're in the most ancient corner of Monte Cassino Monastery. Up above me, the great abbey has been rebuilt. It recovered from its wartime destruction. But down here, there's a room that's not shown to the public. In fact, it's never actually been filmed before. And what you find in here is a great mass of material that was pulled from the rubble. What you see is bits of marble columns, bits of ornate door surrounds, mantelpieces perhaps. You get a sense of just how destructive the bombing was. Stepping in here is a little bit like stepping back to that moment when the fighting stopped, and here you get a rather grim reminder of the killing that went on the slopes around the monastery. Thousands of soldiers dying on both sides in that conflict. And what would the statue tell us if it could tell its story? Over here, some bits of fresco and paintwork, including an image of Saint Benedict, the holy man who founded this monastery so long ago. Some of this material will be from very valuable pieces, grand works of art, sculptures and so on, but a lot of it too is much more simple things, dishes and plates that the monks of Monte Cassino might have used way back in the Dark Ages. And the room goes on and on up there. It's a sort of time capsule where the monastery has buried some of its darkest memories of its wartime destruction.
Okay, ooh, and that one ended kind of quickly on us there, friends. Now our next story shows a little more of what I was saying to you about how things on this chart are accelerating to where this fifth seal could kick in, where it could be kicking in even this year. Our next story relates to that in a way. Listen to the lead-in on this. Ukraine is edging towards the point of no return. The UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights has warned. Ivan Simonovic told the BBC the divisions in the country were deepening with each incident and called on all parties to de-escalate the tension in the east. He told Mark Lowen that the window of opportunity to find a solution with a united Ukraine was closing.
What I am really afraid is that country is approaching to a point of no return if there is no adequate and urgent action taken. We already estimate that some 250 people have died. In the eastern part of country, 127. But recently we had a terrible disaster, a terrible tragedy that has taken place in Odessa, which was the largest incident with 48 people being killed. With a lot of question marks, with police not reacting neither promptly nor decisively. And this requires thorough, impartial investigation, including not only direct perpetrators, but all who were involved in either inciting it, inspiring it, or not preventing it.
Do you believe that Ukraine has reached civil war?
I don't think so, and I hope it won't be the case. But the window of opportunity is certainly slowly closing.
But you say that around about 250 people have been killed.
Right.
If that is not civil war, what is?
We in international community are expecting International Committee of the Red Cross, who is the guardian of Geneva Conventions and is the one arbitrating about international humanitarian law, to be the first one to just qualify something as an internal armed conflict. So far, ICRC has not done that.
You yourself are from Croatia.
Right.
To what extent is what you're seeing in Ukraine stirring memories and resembling what happened to Yugoslavia in the 1990s?
In former Yugoslavia, it took over 100,000 victims to reach political settlement. Can't we reach political settlement in Ukraine without such a heavy toll?
Do you believe that a united Ukraine is still possible?
I firmly believe that there is a window of opportunity that should be used.
But it's getting smaller and smaller.
The window is closing.
Friends, I know we've gone a little more than a half hour now, and I've got more to go. And if you have to go, I understand. But in the videos we have remaining, it'll help you understand the future events affecting Ukraine. For example, this next video shows how the Russian President Vladimir Putin is visiting China this week to boost economic ties with Beijing, and he's doing this at a time of growing tension in Russia's relations with Europe. The biggest deal on the table for Moscow is a multi-billion-dollar agreement to pump Russian gas to China. Can you imagine what this is going to do for Russia and how the sanctions that the West is trying to throw at it would just become absolutely meaningless? In fact, it would put the West at a disadvantage because they need this gas from Russia. And so that's why sanction threat is kind of laughable in Russia. It's almost ineffective, and if Russia can pull off this thing with China, it'll be quite a leg up against the West. Russia's economy is heavily reliant on energy exports. In this video, Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg looks at just how dependent Russia is on sales of oil and gas from the comfort of his own kitchen. He does kind of I wish Ken Evans were watching tonight. He's in News Always Bad. Steve Rosenberg, in this one, Ken does kind of he uses a little resourcefulness and makes this a light-hearted video, even though it's a very serious story. Here's Steve Rosenberg with this report.
You know, many economists will tell you that the recipe for a strong, sustainable economy is actually very simple. Make sure you don't put all your eggs in one basket. In other words, diversity is the key. Having an economy that's based on lots of different things. For example, manufacturing and agriculture and farming. Maybe new technologies, IT and software. And for some countries, tourism is a very important source of income. But diversity isn't something the Russian economy is known for. Russia has placed all its economic eggs in one basket. It's heavily reliant on one thing, exporting energy, selling its oil and gas. Most of that has been going to Europe. In fact, it's gas sales to Europe that generates 80% of the revenue of the Russian energy giant Gazprom. But now there's a problem. Tension over Ukraine means friction with Russia's main customer. European governments are already looking to reduce their dependency on Russian energy. Now, that won't happen overnight, but it's pushing Russia to seek alternative markets and new customers. So, if President Putin can clinch an energy deal with Beijing this week, very soon Russian gas could be heading to China. It's an agreement the two countries have been talking about for years, but they've been unable to agree on a price. If it is signed, that would be good for China. It has an insatiable appetite for energy to feed its growing economy. And it would allow Russia to turn around to the West and say, you don't want our energy? That's fine. We found someone else to buy it. The Russians have been scrambling to finalise the deal with China because they know that serious cracks have emerged in Moscow's relationship with the West.
And friends, you know, it wasn't long ago that United States Vice President Joe Biden went to China to try to cook up a deal with China for U.S.-Chinese relations. And yet shortly after that, the United States took sides with Japan over the islands in the South China Seas. And today, in today's news, the United States has charged 5 Chinese Army officers with hacking into private sector American companies in a bid for competitive advantage. In the first cyber espionage case of its kind. U.S. prosecutors say the Chinese officers, stole trade secrets and internal documents from 5 companies and a labor union. China denied the charges and warned the case could harm U.S.-China relations. And remember, again, I just mentioned how U.S. Vice President Joe Biden very recently went to China to try to improve U.S.-China relations. I'll have that. While this one's playing, I'll dig out that video for you. This report is from Mark Mardell in Washington.
According to the FBI, these men are criminals, but Ugly Gorilla and his associates Candy Goo and Win X Happy are, despite their aliases, no ordinary bad guys, but Chinese army officers, presumably doing the bidding of their government.
We must say enough is enough. This administration will not tolerate actions by any nation that seeks to illegally sabotage American companies and undermine the integrity of fair competition in the operation of the free market.
This dull building in Shanghai is the base for Unit 61398 of the People's Liberation Army, the home, according to US officials, of what they call 21st century burglary. Britain has complained about cyber attacks in the past, but the Americans are now being much more explicit. The 5 Chinese army officers are accused of targeting the US metal and energy industries between 2006 and 2012. They're charged with fraud, identity theft and economic espionage. Specifically, stealing sensitive financial information from a solar power company, stealing plans from a company building nuclear power stations in China, and hacking into US Steel's computers and installing malware. This is the result, according to US law officers. A Pittsburgh steel plant on the day it laid off 140 workers because of competition from China.
The lifeblood of any organization is the people who work, strive, and sweat for it. When these cyber intrusion occurs, production slows, plants close, workers get laid off and lose their homes.
When President Obama met China's President Xi last summer, they talked of a new type of relationship, but competition slides easily into hostility. Recent tensions over China's ambition in the Pacific haven't helped. This could make things worse.
The big issue is that U.S.-China relations are getting, we're not tolerating each other, we're trying to keep the other from getting advantage, and we're using various aspects of the relationship to try to send strong messages. The unfortunate thing about this cyber case that's now been announced is that precious little we can do about it. These guys aren't going to walk into an American airport and say, I surrender to the FBI.
You might think with all the recent revelations about American spying that people in White Houses shouldn't throw stones, but they say this is different, about one state doing real harm to another, and it has to stop. Mark Mardell, BBC News, Washington.
Mark, that was an excellent ending on your report there, my friend. People in White Houses shouldn't throw stones. That was excellent. Excellent, Mark. Thank you. Friends, I've got the video for you. It goes back to December 5, when U.S. Vice President Joe Biden told the American business community in Beijing that he was aiming to create a new type of relationship with China, one that's closer to the demands of the 21st century. In a meeting organized by the American Chamber of Commerce, he also touched on the issue of human rights and emphasized the need for regional stability, security, and predictability in order to continue with progress and economic growth. Mr. Biden, in his visit to Beijing, admitted, quote, our relationship with China is complex. Or I guess he said that following his visit. The vice president was in Beijing as part of a tour of Asia. Here's that video from December 5.
We're trying to build a new kind of relationship between major powers, one that's different, one that is defined by constructive cooperation, healthy competition, and a shared respect for an agreed-upon new set of rules of the road and international norms for the 21st century. We have many disagreements, and some profound disagreements on some of those issues right now, the treatment of U.S. journalists. But I believe China will be stronger and more stable and more innovative if it respects universal human rights. Our relationship with China is complex, though. We have our differences, and they are real. But there's nothing inevitable about a conflict with China. Nothing inevitable about a conflict with China. Wholesome competition and strong competition is fundamentally different than conflict. In fact, we see considerable common interest on the security side. A secure and peaceful Asia-Pacific enables economic growth for the entire region.
And friends, I have a report from today's news from Beijing with Martin Patience showing how something like nearly 2,000 people from the industrial port of Vungang, one of the sites hardest hit by the recent violence, have just boarded planes and are evacuating they're evacuating China. I'm sorry, they're evacuating Vietnam after the deadly riots there against the Chinese workers in Vietnam. And these Chinese workers are now returning home.
Glad to be home and lucky to have escaped. These workers were among the walking wounded flown back to China. I feel secure now, said this man. I no longer feel afraid. And more evacuees leaving by ship today. They were among workers targeted during anti-Chinese violence that flared across Vietnam. Last week, rioters rampaged through foreign-owned factories, killing 2 Chinese workers and injuring dozens of others. And here, on the horizon, is what fueled the violence. Earlier this month, China deployed a $1 billion oil rig in waters claimed by both the countries. The rig is to the west of the Paracel Islands, which along with the Spratlys are disputed between China and Vietnam. China claims almost all of the South China Sea, but Vietnam also claims a large swathe of the same area. Tensions on land and at sea are now running high. This dramatic footage shows a Chinese Coast Guard vessel colliding with a Vietnamese ship, and the fear is that a serious accident could trigger a conflict. Martin Patience, BBC News, Beijing.
Thank you, Martian. Thank you, Mr. Patience. Martin. Friends, we are getting close to the 1 hour mark. Let's just make tonight's report a full hour program. And our next report will show one of the things that our Father and Jesus Christ want to have written in the 6,000 years of the history of mankind, and that is that man cannot govern himself. In this next video, the BBC's Anna Halligan was at a hearing today related to a story and with a man that has 11 charges against him that he's denying, including alleged involvement in the massacre of more than 7,000 men and boys at Shrewsbury, at a city you'll see mentioned in this video. And friends, whether he did these things charged against him or not, it shows some atrocities that happen with man trying to govern man. Here's Anna Halligan with this report.
For many of the survivors, his face is synonymous with their suffering. The prosecution used this extensive footage of General Mladic on the battlefield during their case. Here he is in Srebrenica, just before the slaughter started. His defense will argue that paramilitary groups were responsible for the massacre, that he had no idea these atrocities, the worst since the Second World War, were being committed, and that all commands given by this self-proclaimed patriot were purely designed to defend his people. The first defence witness, Mile Sidoje, was an assistant commander in Ratko Mladic's VRS army. He served in Sarajevo during the 3-year siege, in which approximately 12,000 people were killed, most of them Muslims. General Mladic's forces are accused of conducting a prolonged campaign of shelling and sniping designed to kill and spread terror among civilians. The first witness's evidence relates to the use of snipers. He denied they had access to rifles with optical sights or telescopic lens used by snipers. He also told the court they were under orders only to open fire in the event of an enemy attack. Well, according to the prosecution, Ratko Mladic was part of a targeted campaign designed to ethnically cleanse parts of Bosnia and turn them into an ethnically pure Serb republic. The defence has been given the same amount of time as the prosecution to present their side of the case, and that's 207 hours, which means, in theory, this high-profile trial could go on for at least another 2 years. For those whose relatives lie here, justice can only be served if Ratko Mladic stays alive for long enough to face his final legal judgment. Anna Halligan, BBC News, at the Yugoslav Tribunal in The Hague.
Thank you, Anna. Friends, I'll close with a story tonight that if you didn't see enough to really be able to put your heart in your prayers before you go to bed tonight, or noontime, whatever, if you're watching this from the archive tomorrow, or, tomorrow from tonight when we're live, this next story should help you be able to really do that. This next story with Sophia Tran-Thompson reporting shows how a bus that may have been smuggling petrol caught fire and killed at least 30 people, most of them believed to have been children under 14.
The seats were full, crowded with children. They were returning from an evangelical church event near Fundación, north of Bogota. Local police say most of the passengers were under 14. There's no official explanation as to what caused the fire, but local media say the bus may have been smuggling petrol.
There was a young man who was rescuing several girls. A girl reached her arms out to him, but the blaze that was coming out of the bus didn't allow the man to remove the girl, and he had to stop.
Local officials say the bus was supposed to carry 38 passengers, but around 50 were on board.
Regrettably, we have to inform you that 32 bodies of people, 32 children, have been removed, and 20 have been injured and taken to hospitals.
Investigations are underway, but it's unlikely that any explanation will make this tragedy easier for the families involved. Sophia Tran-Thompson, BBC News.
And friends, we have just time to close with this report from Nick Bryant in New York.
The radical cleric Abu Hamza, notorious in Britain as the face of extremism, and now convicted in America of using his base at the Finsbury Park Mosque in London to fight global jihad.
Islamic State, when it did apply the rule of God.
Prosecutors portrayed him as the boss, a firebrand preacher who dedicated his life to fighting, shooting, killing. The jury rejected the claim of his defence that he'd worked secretly for MI5 to keep the streets of London safe and acted as a moderating influence on young Muslims. In Britain in 2006, he'd been sentenced to 7 years in prison for soliciting murder and inciting racial hatred. He was flown to America in 2012 after an 8-year fight by US prosecutors to gain his extradition. The main charge centred on the kidnapping of this group of Western tourists in Yemen in 1998, which ended in the deaths of 3 Britons and an Australian. Abu Hamza bought a satellite phone used by the kidnappers and spoke with the ringleader in Yemen in the midst of the hostage crisis. The Egyptian-born cleric was also accused of trying to set up a jihadist training camp in rural Oregon on America's west coast, in a court complex close to the site of the September the 11th attacks. He spoke of his love for Osama bin Laden, although he said he disagreed with the al-Qaeda leader's methods.
Bin Laden, al-Qaeda, 9/11, World Trade Center, USS Cole, all those things which our client was not charged with specifically, they played much more of a role than we believe it should have.
Abu Hamza, as the trial showed, attempted to portray himself as a preacher of faith, but he was, instead, a trainer of terrorists. That has now been proven in an American court to a unanimous jury beyond a reasonable doubt.
His hook confiscated, he kept notes throughout, using a prosthetic with a pen attached. The largely calm figure who appeared in court was almost unrecognizable from the fiery cleric of old. It was an act, said the prosecution, to trick the jury.
And friends, that'll be it for our report tonight on this Monday night, May 19. A little longer report tonight. Those of you who stayed with me for the whole report, I think you'll have gotten some value from it, news-wise. Thank you for joining me tonight, friends. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow evening, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbert, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.